Hello, this is Rick Jordan, Church Resources Coordinator for the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship of North Carolina. I want to welcome you to today's webinar on Ministers and Money, which is being led by Bo Prosser. Bo is the former Coordinator of Ministries at CBF Global. He is currently a CBF Catalytic coach and consultant, and he is the Director of the Ministerial Excellence Initiative that informs and supports pastoral leaders in financial education. Today's webinar will begin with Bo's presentation, and if you have comments or questions to ask, you can scroll to the bottom of your screen. There will be a box there that says Q&A. Click on that, and then you can type in your question or your comment. But we will hold them till the end of the presentation. But you can put them in at any time during the presentation. So if you have a question, go ahead and enter that. Thank you for participating in today's webinar. Just a reminder that we are recording this and it will be stored on the CBF of North Carolina website in our resource library. Bo, welcome. And before you begin your formal presentation, tell us how you became interested in this subject.
Well, good morning, Rick, and thanks for having me and giving me this opportunity. About 4.5 years ago, we were in Indianapolis visiting with the Lilly Endowment leadership. We had done lots of work with Lilly along the way, and they invited us to send a proposal to participate in their Economic Challenges grant. And we did apply for that and received a $1 million grant from Lilly to begin helping pastoral leaders deal with financial issues. Part of that money is for literacy, which this is one of those literacy events. Part of that money is for direct money grants to go to pastoral leaders to help give them debt relief. And so 4.5 years ago, when somebody gives you $1 million, you pay attention to that.
Right.
So I've tried to manage my own money and finances through the years, but I got a $1 million gift to get interested in that, and I got interested in it pretty quick.
Right. That's a good motivator.
Exactly. And the more I've gotten into it, the more research I've done with our own pastoral leaders and the work that I'm still doing with the endowment. We are in some crisis points as we deal with money and finances, both in our congregations and personally. So I'm fascinated and challenged at the same time with this topic.
All right, great. Well, thank you for being here, and I really appreciate you giving us this time and expertise. And you can we'll let you take off with it.
Okie doke. Thank you, Rick. I'm going to be sharing with you some of the information that I've picked up through our 3 years working on this project. And we're going to look at money and the effects it has on ministerial excellence. According to the Lilly Endowment, financial stressors are the biggest impediment to healthy church leadership. Whether this be your personal financial stressors or congregational financial stressors. Trying to lead when your own financial house is not in order is a big stress on pastoral leadership. And when your congregational finances are not in order, that also is a financial stress on you. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but trying to get a handle on the financial stressors so that you can lead with confidence. Again, not that your finances have to be perfect, but they are an area of leadership that you're working on. They are a spiritual discipline. Finances are a spiritual discipline that you're working on. And as you work on those finances, work on your personal finances, on your congregational finances, your confidence increases, your leadership increases, and people will follow you in ways to help you continue making successful strides around those issues. a couple of areas where money impacts all of us. What we found in our research within the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship area is that the two biggest stressors our pastoral leaders have are consumer debt and student loan debt. These were the top two places where we have the biggest stress that we're dealing with. Along with that, housing costs, followed by auto loans, food, consistent expenses being a savings account, a forced savings account, or insurance, or whatever that might be, that are your electric bill, your water bill, such as that. And then retirement, perhaps you have enough money left over in your check each month to take care of health insurance and life insurance. And then perhaps maybe an offering to the church. This is where we find our pastoral leaders struggling. Each of these issues carry with them some financial demands. What we have found as we've done survey work with the constituents within the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship is about 42% of our pastors are carrying debt twice their salary load. And for the most part, their funding goes to pay off their consumer debt, which is most probably credit card debt, or perhaps a second loan, second mortgage, and student loan debt. That 42% are dealing with debt twice their salary. Those numbers don't include what they would also pay towards housing or auto or any of the other expenses that are listed here. So a great number of our pastoral leaders within CBF are dealing with some heavy financial debt, and those struggles are real and scary. And one of the things we've tried to do with our Lilly Grant is to reduce some of that. Through our Ministerial Excellence Initiative, you're able to apply for a $10,000 cash grant from us. $8,000 of that you can apply towards any of these debt issues that are listed on this handout, and $2,000 of that goes to fund a retirement benefit for you with our church benefits board. CBB is also helping sponsor this podcast today, and I'm grateful for their partnership with CBF North Carolina in doing so. Heavy debt that we're carrying, and we're not unusual. Consumer debt, student loan debt, housing costs are the big three that across the board pastoral leaders are dealing with. And these money stressors have carry a significant impact to the quality of leadership, because we're not able to keep our own financial house in order. How are we able to deal with the church? As one of our participants in this first session of MEI said, I'm failing as a father, I'm failing as a parent, I'm failing as a leader, I'm failing as a money manager. How in the world am I supposed to lead my church when I can't even pay my bills every week? So some heavy stressors that our pastoral leaders are dealing with. One of the things beyond the list that we just looked at is the hidden costs of technology. I found this statistic in the last few weeks. Americans spend the equivalent of 17% of their monthly housing costs on technology. You may or may not find yourself at that level, even at 10%. If you're at 10% of your monthly housing and you're paying $1,000 a month on a house or on housing, 10% of that, $100 a month on technology, I can tell you that my cable bill is a whole lot more than $100 a month. And I don't have the expensive cables. I have basic cable, and it's more than $100 a month. But we're at a place where we have to have technology. I have a cell phone, and I'm always connected. 24/7, I'm available on the internet and email and texting. You have those same expenses. And the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants did this survey work and passed along this data. It's easy to spend money. I don't know if you find that true at your house, but in my house, it's easy to spend money. Technology alone, look at the expenses that are draining us technologically: high-speed cable and internet. If you play games on the internet, you have to have high-speed cable. If you are a presenter at all, if you do coaching at all, whatever you may be doing extra beyond your pastoral leadership, high-speed cable and internet is a must for you to continue doing your work and staying current. Many of us also have to have car technology. You may have put a Bluetooth system in your car, or your car may have come with a Bluetooth system, but that's an added expense that many of us don't even think about. Sirius XM radio is one of the best gifts I've ever given myself. As I'm riding down the road doing work with churches, I'm able to carry Radio Margaritaville with me, and Jimmy Buffett and I have some great singing concerts. But that's an expense that we rarely think about. The streaming services that you're a part of, Netflix, HBO to go, all of those streaming services, a lot of us are carrying both cable TV and streaming services. Those costs add up. The apps that you add to your phone, many of them come with a cost. You don't think anything about spending $1 or $2 to add an app to your phone service, but you add 5 or 6 of those, you spent $10, and that means you got to forego your 2 cups of coffee a day at Starbucks. By the way, $10 of Starbucks coffee, I think that may be 2 cups of coffee a day, and a lot of our pastoral leaders are drinking high-end coffees and teas. I drink Diet Coke, and it's $1.29 at the Quickie Mart. But for others of us, $10 a day on coffee, and we don't even think about it. Technologically, again, updating old technology. I get updates all the time, and many of them come with a cost. And then if you have all these devices, you have all this technology in your home, you have to have security services to keep the dark web at the door and away from you. It's easy to spend money without even thinking. And I don't know about where you find yourself in the expenses that you're dealing with. But until you write down where your money's going, it will be easier and easier to spend money. In our family and the place we are in life, we have 2 sets of twin grandchildren, and we get bombarded with all of these magazines on clothing and toys for children. My office area, part of it is now designated for toys for our grandchildren. Today in the mail, we got 2 packages for our grandchildren. And I said to Gail, my wife, we're going to have to watch and pay attention to what we're spending, because everybody comes with cute clothes for your kids or your grandkids. Everybody wants to dress their kids in the cutest outfit. That costs money, and it's easy to spend money unless you begin to keep track of your finances. So let's talk about what that means. All these expenses that we're dealing with, what are we supposed to do to help us try to figure out what that's about? Well, the first thing is to establish some written financial goals and some written financial trails so that you see where your money's going. As we've moved towards retirement, Gail has retired from a career in teaching. She now has a skincare business with Rodan and Fields. If you looked at my Facebook page, you've seen me posting some of her Rodan and Fields work. I am semi-retired. I'm part-time with Cooperative Baptist Fellowship still, and part-time doing coaching. We had to write down some financial goals, and this next chapter of our life, what do we want to happen? What do we want to see happening financially? Obviously, we want to retire in comfort, and we don't want to run out of money in retirement. So establishing those written goals and keeping them in front of us on an ongoing basis. Once a quarter, we sit down and review where we are financially. Not only do we write down our goals, once a quarter, we also review where our cash flow is and how we're spending our money. And so we have a paper trail, again, written out so that we can see in July, in January, we spent this much money. In February, we spent this much money. In March, we spent this much money. We had this much money coming in. We had this much money going out. And if you see the amount of money is less than the amount of money going out, you can only work from a deficit spending for so long, unless you're the United States government. But I'm not going to talk about them today. They've not called me for coaching so far. After you establish what your financial goals are, after you've taken a peek at what your cash flow looks like, and I want to stress writing that down so you have a picture of it, so you have a hard copy picture of it. Gail and I work off of an Excel spreadsheet so that we can keep up with our finances and see them month to month and what we're doing. If you don't write your goals down, sooner or later, other goals take precedent. If you don't write your cash flow down, sooner or later, you lose track of where your money's going. Now, I've got to make a confession to you. I hate this part of financial management. I hate this part of money management. Being held accountable to a goal that Gail and I established hems me in a little bit. And if you know me, you know that I like to work at 30,000 feet rather than 5,000 feet. And it was really painful to sit down and write out 3 financial goals that we would be held accountable to. Gail and I worked with a financial advisor. That financial advisor holds us accountable to these written goals. And Gail and I hold ourselves accountable to the laid out cash flow that is before us each quarter. I hate this part of the process because when I look at our finances on paper, while it's improved over the years, it's still not where I would have us be. And I have to work harder than not to spend money and to make some, sometimes to make some challenges to myself. Do you really need satellite radio? Is that really an expense? And while it is a luxury, what I do with that is each year for gifting, I share with my children, I want to continue my satellite radio subscription. And so my birthday gift and Christmas gift helps me do that from my kids. They give me something they know I enjoy. I get a gift that I know I'm going to use and enjoy. And that's how I kind of trade out that expense, if you will. So writing it down is painful, but useful and needed. And I would really encourage you to write out your goals. This second point may seem juvenile to you. Spend less than you earn. Most of us spend more than we earn every month, which means we're turning to credit card debt or we're turning to bank loans or second mortgages on our homes, sometimes third mortgages on our homes. It's difficult for us to manage money when money is readily available to us through credit cards and bank loans and other avenues that are available to us. If you're like me, my mailbox is full of free money, and I can have credit as long as my arm if I wish to do that. One of the pastoral leaders that have come to us for help through the Ministerial Excellence Initiative, as we looked at their finances, they were carrying 14 credit cards. 14 credit cards. And each of those credit cards had more than $3,000 to $4,000 in credit charges on those cards. That's over $50,000 in debt at an interest rate of 14% or higher. It would take a lifetime, it will take a lifetime to get out of that kind of debt, unless you have savings or you plan on inheriting a big amount. And I don't know about you, but I don't have those resources to help me dig out of that big a debt load. So on the front end, it's easier just not to spend than to put it on interest. The testimony of this pastoral leader said, I kept getting letters from credit card companies that said I was pre-approved up to $5,000, and I needed $5,000 to pay off another credit card. So I would apply for that card. I was already pre-approved. They would send me a $5,000 check. I would send part of that to the credit card that I owed, and I would celebrate with part of that check. And this pastoral leader found himself deeper and deeper and deeper in debt. The same is true with student loans. One of our applications was to do doctoral work. And as we talked with this candidate about the importance of their doctoral goal, we found out that they were going to go to Oxford and do doctoral work. And it would be about $100,000 worth of debt. Obviously, my little gift was not going to help them very much. And we challenged them on, why are you going to Oxford for a D-Min when you can do that here and make money, have income while you're doing that? And it was their goal to have an Oxford degree. They had no idea how they were going to finance it other than a second mortgage on a home that they would rent while they were in Oxford. Maybe not the best way to pursue doctoral work, but that was what we were up against with that particular pastoral leader. Another thing to do is to look at the interest rates of your credit cards and your bank loans and other debt that you may be carrying, and pay the minimum on your lower interest rate cards and pay high interest debt first. If you look at any of the gurus of financial management, at least any of the modern day folks who consider them gurus, they will say that you pay a bit of the minimum on every debt that you own and put a majority of your pay towards that higher interest rate first. Pay off that debt as fast as you can, and then you move to the next highest rate of interest. Because regardless of what your balance may be, that high interest is compounding every month. And if you're looking at a student loan at 3% versus a credit card at 16%, you can see it's not going to take long for that credit card to keep compounding at 16%. And if all you're doing is paying the minimum, the compounding interest is going to far move beyond whatever you're paying. So again, as you write down what each bill is and what each rate of finance is, go for that highest rate of interest first, pay it down, and then move to the second one and pay it down, and move to the third one and pay it down. While you're paying the minimum payment, at least the minimum payment on each of your other debts. Another thing to do is think long term. You didn't get in your financial place in a day or two, and you're not going to get to the next level of more positive financial management until you write down some goals and begin doing some payment options. So it's a long-term goal. Those of you who come with some real high debt, it's going to take you 3 to 5 years to move to a place where you can be financially comfortable. But in those 3 to 5 years, you're going to be making incremental growth steps towards a more positive area in financial management. And as you make those incremental steps, you're going to find that you're feeling better and better and better about yourself, because you're doing something that's positive. You're doing something that you can see a direct result of positive steps as you move to pay down those high interest debts. One person that attended our training and was a grant recipient did not want to follow our advice about paying high interest debt first. He said to us, I have a $10,000 student loan debt, and every night I have trouble going to sleep worrying about that student loan. My student loan is at 2%. I know that I'm carrying some debt on my credit cards at 16 and 21%. Don't bother me, but my student loan bothers me. And so with his grant from us, he went and paid off his student loans, and then was able to go to work on those higher interest rates. That was not our advice, but that was what he needed to do for his own self. So if one of those debts is bothering you, go and take care of that. It's a long-term process, though. Know that you're in a 3 to 5 year process of paying down long-term debt. The other thing that I suggest is that you contribute consistently to a savings fund, that you contribute consistently to life insurance and or retirement. It may be that all you can do is $25 a month to a savings plan, $25 a month to a retirement fund, but contribute consistently to those plans as well. You will be astonished at what compounding does for savings and for retirement. Compounding is working against you in your debt, but compounding can also work for you as you're establishing some assets. And I don't know about you, but I throw $25 a month away on Diet Coke. And I can do without Netflix if I have to pay myself a little bit of retirement. Find some ways to pull some money from your cash flow and pay yourself while you're paying off some of these decisions around money. Also, find some money, whatever it may be, find some money to go to your tithe. Here is the budget that I would suggest you look at and try to move into. As hard as it will be, your budget should look like this. 80% of your budget is for living life. And if I talk to many of you and I say, how are you doing? You would respond to me, well, Bo, it's just another day in paradise. Many of us are spending 110 to 150% of our salary level to maintain life in paradise. So maybe rather than another day in paradise, what about it's just another day in the suburbs, and reduce that level down just a little bit. 80% of your cash flow every month should go to living life, and all those expenses that we looked at the beginning of our presentation. 10%, I know this is high for most of us, but a tithe, 10%. Most pastoral leaders cannot tithe. Most pastoral leaders have no money whatsoever to tithe. And so we say to ourselves, but I'm working 65 hours a week. I'm working 80 hours a week at the church. So I'm going to tithe those 15 or 20 hours a week extra. That's going to be my tithe. And I've been there, and I've rationalized that myself. But when the offering plate is passed, it's then hard for me to challenge the community, the faith community of which I'm a part, to say, please, folks, the church needs your money to continue to do the ministries that we've set are priorities. If I'm living my life at 110% or 150%, and I don't have any money to give into that offering plate, it's hard for me to challenge my church to tithe. It's hard for me to challenge my church to give, because here's something else. Most of them are living at that same level of credit and debt ratio. Philanthropic giving across the nation is 3 to 5%. I've just finished the interim at Providence Baptist Church in Charleston. And the first Sunday I was there, I said to the church, I want you to know that whatever you pay me as the interim pastor, I'm going to tithe that back to the church. You could have heard a pin drop when I said that. I went on to say that Gail and I have prayerfully said to ourselves, whatever else we're dealing with in our lives, for this time in our life, we're going to tithe back to the church 10%. No one in that church was giving at that level. But I challenged them to give 1% more than they were giving at that particular time. At the end of the sermon, the fella came out and said, Reverend, you said you were going to give 10%, but you challenged us to give 1% more. You going to give 1% more? And I said, well, since you challenged me, I guess I am. And so every month, I would give a giving report of how much the church had paid me, my giving had been, and it wasn't at 10%, it was then at 11%. I had set a goal for our church members. I had to participate in that. I don't mind telling you, some months that was more money that I could have used for other debt. But I'd made a commitment, Gail and I had made a commitment together that was what we were going to do. But guess what happened? In the life of our church, our giving went up. We gave more money last year to the church at that church. More money was given than had ever been given before. And I am convinced that it was because I took a lead in money management, not only in the life of my own personal life, but in the life of the church, and was transparent enough to challenge them and call them out, and at the same time respond to that challenge. It wasn't easy, but I can tell you it was fulfilling. The average pastor preaches about money, talks about money in any setting. The average pastor talks about money one time a year. The average church is behind budget between 10 and 25%. Pastors are not talking about money, mainly because they're embarrassed or even shamed about their own financial situation. Let me stop for just a minute to say, for many of us, we received no financial training. Through our undergraduate work, through our graduate work, I don't know about you, but I never took a course. I was never offered a course on personal finances. I was never offered a course on congregational finances. At one point early in my ministry, 2 months back to back, I had to borrow money from our pastor to pay our electric bill. And I was ashamed. I was ashamed of myself. And I felt guilty, but I also felt convicted. After that second month, I was not ever going to have to ask my pastor for money to pay again. Many of us have never been taught how to manage money. And we live with shame and guilt and pain for that. One of the goals of the Ministerial Excellence Initiative is to reduce the pain and suffering that we carry for our debt load. Are you to blame for your debt? Yes, you are. Because part of it is just living life. But don't carry your guilt with you. Don't carry your guilt, which is why we're working hard to give you some handles on how to eat this monster one bite at a time, both within your personal life and within your congregational lives. So 80% goes to living life. 10%, if you can manage that, goes to a tithe. And 10%, if you can manage that, goes to savings. So that you're building up a reserve fund when something unexpected comes your way, or when something even expected comes your way. Then you have a reserve in that savings that you can dip into without having to go back to the credit card or back to the bank for that extra money. Financial gurus will say that our savings should be at least 3 months of our annual salary. So whatever you are making, you're building towards 3 months of that in a reserve in a savings account. It's difficult. I know, believe me, I know. And every month I struggle with this 80-10-10 rule. And at this point in our lives, Gail and I are seeing our income go down, and our expenses are not going down. We are in the midst of working with our financial manager to manage our expenses better, because we want to live at a lifestyle where we are at 70% of living life, and we're at 10 to 15% of tithing. And then we're continuing to work on a savings account, which will one day go towards our grandchildren. Those are goals that we've set, aggressive goals that we've set. But those are important for us, and we have them written down so that we can refer back to them and remind ourselves of what we're working towards. This is a hard place. When I share this with my children, they don't want to hear it. My adult children are also living way beyond their means, and they are challenged by this as well. I share this same webinar with them and challenge them as I challenge you and as I challenge myself. I don't have all this down yet. I don't have 3 months of living expenses in a savings account, but I'm working towards it and contributing towards it consistently, so that soon I'll be at a place where I can relax a bit with our money and our cash flow. And then you know what will happen. A car will break down, or the roof will leak, or the microwave will blow up, and we'll have to dip into our reserve and buy a new car, replace the roof, whatever it may be, and then we'll have to start all over again. But we will not have had to go to a credit card or to the bank for an extended loan and go deeper in debt. So we continue to save consistently. We continue to give consistently. And we're living life. And you know what? Some of those things I've cut out, like Diet Coke. Instead of 3 or 4 Diet Cokes a day, I drink water, which my doctor says is better for me anyway. And then when I have a Diet Coke, it's a celebration of where I found myself. A couple of myths as we wind down this experience. The harder I work, the more I make. That's a myth. Most of the time, the harder I work is just the harder I work. You can spend 80 hours at the church. You can spend 100 hours at the church. But the church is going to pay you what the church has already said it's going to pay you. Your salary is a measure of your self-worth. That's also a myth. Your salary is just one indicator of your self-worth. Your self-worth is who you are in here as a child of God. Your self-worth is who you are in here as you live into your calling. Salary is just one indicator of that. The money that you have, the things that you have around you, most of them don't make you any happier. Most of them don't give you any more self-worth. I have things around me that at one point in my life I thought were the most important things that I needed. And now they're in the attic getting dusty and mean nothing to me. The more I have, the happier I'll be. No. The less I have, the happier I am. And at this point in my life, after being a collector of things for 40 years in my adult life, I'm now trying to get rid of all those collections. And if you're a Coca-Cola collector, I have some great things I'd like to talk to you about. And I can enhance your collection. Even though I'm telling you, don't be a collector. Clean out a lot of that clutter. I promise you, you'll be happier. Making minimum payments is enough. Many of us think, well, if I just make the minimum payment, I'll keep the bank away. As I've already shared with you, making minimum payments is enough if you are working on that one high interest payment. And you get rid of that high interest payment, and then you move down to the next one. But the rule of compounding catches up with us, and we have to try to stay ahead of that. So a couple of things about money. When God's people understand the needs, they become very generous. Find a financial advisor near you who will work with you, or call me and let's see about getting you some help. Email me, bprosser@cbf.net. My CBF email address is still at work. And email me and let's have a conversation about what we can see to help you. But find an advisor. One of the parts of our Ministerial Excellence Initiative, if you receive a grant, you have to have a trusted person in your congregation to work with you. We call that person the trusted congregational advocate. That advocate understands your financial situation and helps hold you gently accountable, but also works with you to find an advisor, to make some plans, to set some goals. And we have found that to be the very strongest part of this grant that we've been working over 3 years' time. The people who've participated have said over and over, thank you for making me find somebody in my congregation who can advise me. We do that with every other area. We put people on the finance committee in our church who are financial people. We put people on the personnel committee who are personnel people. We put people on the building and grounds committee who are knowledgeable and expert in their field with putting in facilities. When it comes to our own personal money, when it comes to the congregational money, oftentimes we're a bit more slow. But working with an advisor and a person in your congregation is a great, great gift that you give to yourself. Stay on your budget as you work out those financial goals that you're putting in place. Stay on your budget. And the third part of working with money is prayer. One of the things I've come to find is that money is a spiritual discipline. There's more written about money in Scripture than almost any other subject. Jesus speaks on money. Paul speaks on money. I've come to believe in these last 4.5 years that money is a spiritual discipline, and that we have to bathe our money in a spirit of prayer just as much as we bathe the rest of our ministry in money. When God's people understand the needs, they become very generous. So how do you raise money for your church? You ask for help. How do you raise money for your own personal needs? You ask for help. One of the stories that I've taken away from the Lilly Endowment is of a pastor whose child was in a car wreck and her mouth was badly disfigured. She was the church kid, if you know what I mean by that. Not only was she special to the pastor and his family, but everybody in the church loved this little girl. And for years after the accident, she would cover her mouth and hide her face because she was embarrassed. One day, the deacon chair came to his wife and said, "Pastor, what's it going to take to get our girl to smile again?" And the pastor hung his head and with embarrassment said, I don't have enough money to pay for plastic surgery. It's $100,000 or more, so the doctors tell us. That head deacon went back to the church and they put on a fundraiser to bring Sarah her smile back. They raised over $150,000 to give Sarah her smile. When God's people understand the needs, they become very generous. And we preach faith. And yet when it comes to our own finances and often our congregational finances, we forget that because of the embarrassment, perhaps the shame and the blame. If you don't hear anything else that I've said today, please hear that while you are responsible for some of that debt that is racked up and that you may be carrying, for some of the situations that you find yourself in, there's a way out. And you are not to blame for all of that. Some of that is just the times in which we find ourselves and the high price of goods and services that we have to carry. But please don't carry that burden alone. Please don't carry that burden alone. The last thing I'd say to you is that the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And so achieving one area of financial growth builds a confidence in every area of your work. Finances are crucial, both in your personal finances and in your congregational finances. Thanks for letting me share with you these 4 years of work, 4 years of growing with pastoral leaders, 4 years of trying to figure out who we are and what we're about. Rick, that's kind of where I find ourselves right now, and what I've been dealing with. I've been talking a while, so I don't know if you have questions. But
we don't have any questions yet. Let me remind our participants that you can scroll down to the box at the bottom of your page that says Q&A if you have questions. And in the meantime, I'll ask a question, Bo. When I went to seminary, it was Southern Baptist Seminary. We were all Southern Baptist. It was very cheap to go. These days, there are possibilities that you can find some expenses to make it relatively inexpensive, but for many people, it's very expensive to go to the seminary, and then they end up going to a church that is dwindling financially, and it's kind of a really bad place to be, a really bad spiral to be in. What's your perception of what's going on in ministerial world for the youngest of our ministers?
Well, I can tell you that student debt is on the minds of a lot of people in this country. And you and I both had the blessing of almost a free graduate education. But folks like Lily, folks even at the federal government level are looking at student loans. What I say to folks who are considering seminary or any graduate school for that matter is that you look at what it's going to cost. You look at how you are going to have to live, and you know that you're going to have to move out of a nicer home into a less nicer home for those 3.5 years or whatever it may be that you do your seminary work, especially if you're doing seminary work in residence. Now there are a lot of programs that offer online programs that still have an expense, but not the heavy expense of moving somewhere and living away, carrying a part-time job or 2 part-time jobs. I worked 3 part-time jobs when I was in seminary, even though I didn't have a heavy student loan. Mm-hmm. But Lily is working at this. Even within CBF life, we're having conversations with some of our deans about expenses and what we can do to help with that. Paul Baxley coming in as the new coordinator of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, very concerned about student debt. Some of our pastors that are in a position to help are willing to at least have a conversation about some of these things. I know that Susie carried that conversation to some of them. So lots of conversation about where we are and what we're up against. Not really solutions yet, but mm-hmm. Conversation is the starting point. So what I say to people who are considering that is to go back to that 80-10-10 rule. Live on 80% or less. You know, while you're in seminary, you're not going to be able to give 10% to the church. You know, you're not going to be able to give 10% to a savings account. But what can you give, and how can you share your giftedness with those around you? And always have somebody to walk with you financially in the same way that you have people to walk with you spiritually. I had an uncle who was, bless his heart, God rest his soul. He gave me my first $3,000 as a down payment on a home. And after seminary, my first job, he said, here's $3,000 to put down to buy you a home. I want you to live in a home. I want you to be comfortable. And I said, Uncle John, I don't know that I'll be able to pay you back for a long time. And he said, you pay me back if you can. The better part of that story is he was not my blood uncle. He was a family friend. But he loved us and cared enough about us that he gave me that $3,000. Doesn't sound like a lot in today's money, but I felt like a blessed man. But I can tell you every month the first bill that I paid was $10 a month to my Uncle John on that $3,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It was a blessing, and it was accountability that I needed. And I had to go back to him a time or two to ask if I could borrow some more money. But he walked with me and cared about me enough that it was always the same. If you can pay this back to me, not when, but if. And so, yeah. And there are people in our churches who will love us that deeply. There are people in our families who will love us that deeply. But what I found is the hardest part is to ask. You know, I'm a minister of the gospel. I'm supposed to have my life in order. You know, I'm closer to God than anybody. Or at least that's another myth that we carry. So we should have everything worked out with our money, with our families, with our leadership. I don't know about you. I do feel close to God, and I nurture that relationship. But there are days I wonder why I don't have it all figured out yet. And I'm near the end of my career. I can tell you there were days of pain, a lot of shame that I carried around some of my financial responsibilities until I finally humbled myself before God, and I humbled myself before that uncle and said, I need help here. And, I think Scripture says when we humble ourselves is when God begins to hear our prayers and help us work on that. So money is a spiritual issue. With our lay people, it's a spiritual issue. With clergy, it's a spiritual issue. And that's a hard lesson. It's a hard lesson, but been one of my most valuable lessons. And thanks be to God for Lily, for other agencies and other family granting. The Baugh Foundation, thanks be to God to the Baugh Foundation and what they have done to help us maintain ministries throughout the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship and beyond. Folks who live philanthropically and live to help us live out our God-given passion as they're living out their God-given passion. So that's a long answer, short question.
No, that's good. That's good. We did get a question about if we find a good candidate for the excellent work that you're doing, how do we connect them to you?
You can connect them through my email, or you can go to cbf.net/MEI, and the application will be there to participate in the grant. We are not live yet with our next round of gifts because we have just gotten a second award from Lily for another $1 million. We've not gone public with that till right now.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. So we are working out the bugs of the website. It will be, our goal is to be live March 15th. So if you'll give us just a couple more days, that application will be live. This time around, we're doing it different. We're still doing a $10,000 cash award. $8,000 of that will go for discretionary spending for debt relief or insurance, medical insurance specifically, if that's a need. And then we will start a $2,000 retirement account with Church Benefits Board in the applicant's name. So $10,000 cash award, $8,000 towards debt relief, $2,000 towards retirement, because what we found is that retirement is the last place that most of our pastoral leaders put money.
Mm.
They pay everything else and forget about paying themselves. And then they find themselves towards the end of their career and they don't have retirement because their churches haven't paid it through the years, perhaps, or they haven't paid it through the years. And so we are making a statement that retirement is just as important as debt relief. And we want you to be a part of that. So we will make that donation to CBB in your name and set you up an account. And then you can go from there with that. And Rob Fox will be happy to participate with you along the way. That'll be live March 15th. The other thing that we found in grant number 1, we gave 60 grants out to people. We still have some money that we will carry with us into this next grant. Many of the people that I talked to said, Bo, I'm in debt and I'm in pain, but I know there are people out there who need this more than I do. I'm not going to apply. I appreciate the training. I appreciate the insights you've shared with me, but I don't want to get in the way of somebody who needs it worse than I do. And that's a humbling gesture. And what I say to those people are, there are people out there who need it more than you, but they don't even know about this. So either go tell one of them or apply yourself and take this money. It's there for you. It is given freely with just a bit of expectation.
Yeah. So be humble enough to accept a gift.
Absolutely. It's hard to ask. I know it's hard to fill out that application, but yes, humble yourself enough to be able to receive God's blessing.
Bo, thank you so much. This has been really informative, and I'm hoping that a lot of people will view this and learn more about you've been very practical on ministers and finances, and I think that's where the rubber hits the road for people. They need to have some really very practical hand-holding help sometimes, and some pats on the back as well to say, you can do it, and you're just the person to help us do that. So thank you so much for sharing today.
Thank you, Rick. I've had a ball. I hope it's been helpful for those of you who attended, and send them to the website, and we'll do our best to help them.
All right. Thank you so much, and thanks for everybody who joined us today.